Hi, everyone. This is a market recap for Wednesday, August 12th, 2026. An interesting day in the market, to say the least. Both the Qs and the SPY were only up slightly on the day. We've been seeing these pops at the open and then these kind of sell-offs all day, um, or just selling off directly from the open. Recently, we did have a small gap up today, which is why the indices are closing green. Um, I don't think that the indices are doing anything inherently wrong, although I do find the divergence between momentum names and the SPY slash Qs to be particularly interesting. Because if we look at semis and DRAM and NeoCloud names and um, you know optics, whatever it might be, they're all they all showed really really nice strength today, separate from the Qs. Um, And again, that's not me saying the Qs and the SPY are doing anything wrong. In fact, I would argue that they are doing lots of things right. In fact, more things right than wrong. Because, when you have a 5 day push like you saw this aggressively, to me, it only makes sense to let the moving averages catch up. It only makes sense to let the stocks that participated in this move right here build out their bases. And that's what we're seeing. And again, that's why I don't think the market is doing anything incorrectly here. In fact, I think it's a lot finally getting a little bit easy to get positioned into this market. Finally, we'll see what happens tomorrow. In fact, in my opinion, the SPY still could stand to go sideways a little bit longer and let the 10-day catch up. Um, but we are seeing kind of some follow through in several names. So whether that happens or not, I'm not sure. I think the SPY is justified to break out tomorrow. I also think the SPY is justified to go sideways a little bit longer. Either way, stocks that I'm interested in are behaving at least a little bit better. So if we look at the Qs, kind of similar idea, um, right? Kind of forming this flag here, which is totally reasonable. The notable stocks that were red, in my opinion, today were the mag stocks. If we look at the ETF, you can kind of see, again, I don't think anything is wrong here. Um, I don't think a check back into the 10 is bad, or even the 20 is bad. Uh, and Amazon still looks fine. I just don't really know what to expect for these, although I think all of them could stand to build out bases, especially a stock like Microsoft and Palantir. Um, and the only exception to that would be Google, which is trading a little bit poorly relative to its peers. Although it's hard to say that when we get a 7% gap down on earnings and then reclaim uh, back up 12 or 11.5%. So again, I don't love that we're losing the 50-day here, but it, Google is just kind of in a weird limbo stage right now. But mag stocks aside, semiconductors have been doing really, really well. Nvidia had a nice day today. Um, I really liked how TSM looked today. You have this really, really tight right side here, right under the 50-day, and a nice breakout. I did not trade this. Think it could have closed a little bit better, but I think this is a fairly valid trade. Um, TSM I liked today. I guess the obvious ones today were NBIS and CoreWeave. Um, NBIS had honestly a really really solid setup if you were watching it, and I had called this out, um, last week at some point. Several times I had made note that I think NBIS happens to look really really good. And if we could get that gap up on earnings and a washout and a reclaim, which is literally exactly what we got. I mean, we had a near picture perfect entry on an NBIS. You washed out right at the open, and then you reclaimed the opening print, and then you were just off to the races from there. Um, you were entitled to take it over 231. Two, I think that's fine. I probably would not have waited for that when you're getting a gap up on earnings. Um, but either way, up 34% today, Really awesome day for NBIS. And what this will do for the for for other momentum stocks, I'm sure it will only be beneficial. Um, Core Weave, similar idea, really nice gap up. Not quite as strong as NBIS, but still really, really good nonetheless. Some of the Neo Cloud type crypto mining stocks, again, got really tight along their moving averages here, right? I think Iron looks pretty good. Not a stock I would trade when you have the 200 and the 50-day right there, but and I think compared to some of these other names, it doesn't look quite as. It looks a little bit better than the other names. So if we look at an Iron or a Riot or a Hut, right? The Riot and Hut and Wolf are much looser charts than an Iron is. Um, so NeoCloud names out of the way. Some of them look okay. Optics were interesting today. If we look at Alight, which completely reclaimed this false breakout here, held the 50 really, really well. Good to see. Still nothing to do with these charts, in my opinion. I don't think there is really a great spot to buy, although AOI is setting up really, really nicely. Again, I don't know where I'd buy this quite yet, but I think it's certainly shaping up. Looks pretty good. Gold names, continued strength. If we look at the gold futures, still kind of right under this 200, which tells me, if we can get a consolidation under the 200 on gold futures, we'll likely get a consolidation pretty much right at this range on gold or on gold miners like NEM. And if we could get a nice little cup and handle here, I mean, that would be awesome for potential trade over this level in the future. Copper names still kind of base building. SCCO maybe an entry yesterday, not really deep enough for my preference, but still building out a nice base. FCX included. Copper futures still look a little bit questionable. However, I still think copper names as a whole look pretty good. Healthcare was interesting today, or the last few days. A nice check back into the 10, nice gap down reclaim. Lily is certainly on my watch right now. I would not mind getting into some Lily over the 11th high. I think it is a really strong looking chart. Of course, I would really have liked to have been on it, on the 7th, but I had already taken a lot of exposure that day and it didn't pan out. So I left it alone. Unfortunately, that was a 2020 mistake. Um, but still looks like it could provide some better opportunities. Oil names still leading the way. I mean, look at it. I mean, this is pretty impressive. Adino or Dino still not quite as strong. MPC looks really good. PBF, nice reclaim. PARR looks pretty good. A lot of the oil names as a whole have pretty solid bases. Still not my favorite sector right now. I think um, oops, the XLE, while it certainly has a good base, I still wouldn't know really where to get involved on a lot of these stocks, like an OVV or a Gush. Um, I just don't really know where I would prefer to get involved. The VLO obviously looks really, really good. Um, Tankers still just chopping around, making it really difficult to get involved in the tankers. I've just kind of given up on these at this point. They're just something I'm tracking, not really as clean as they once were. Although, certainly they look okay still. Um, Financials looked pretty good today, just kind of tightening up. PNC has been a stock I've been watching. I thought this looked good on the 7th. Um, but again, always good to see financials moving. Always helps the market in a big way. But I don't see they're not really a sector I'm looking to trade when there's other stocks moving. I'm perfectly fine trading financials when there's a slow market or money is not really in the momentum space. Um, Aerospace, I mean, I could just go on and on today. A lot of things had really solid moves today. I unfortunately did get stopped out of Lockheed Martin. Man, I tell you, I have certainly had a tough time getting positioned. I bought this on the 7th. I added to it on the 10th, and I bumped my stop up to the low of this day. Um, of course, it barely refilled the gap, and maybe that was a mistake on my end. I should have just left it or bumped my stop to fill the gap and leave it at that. But it bounced and reclaimed. I'm sure this thing is going to be at all-time highs soon enough. A bit irritating there. SpaceX, nice bounce today, and it has been bouncing for an extended period of time. The UFO ETF is sort of slowly grinding higher. Rocket Lab, right? Similar idea. Nothing to do here in my personal opinion. Um, but this kind of was the big mover in my portfolio today. Brinker International reported strong earnings, and this thing put in a 11% day. Awesome. About 14% up at its peak. I trimmed a little bit more off into today's strength, right? If we look at a BJ's, you can kind of see what a potential earnings reaction could look like. Big day and then a gap down the next morning and consolidation, right? BJ's is certainly not doing anything wrong. But a stock like EAT could end up repeating a similar trend and consolidate under this level here. But happy to see strong earnings on EAT. Really, really nice stock. Um, MT and steel names for that matter, still just going sideways. Again, these are not doing anything wrong. Frankly, if this wanted to put in a higher low off the 10, I'd consider a buy at the close and add to my position. Although I don't really know if I want to put more exposure on in the steel space when there's so much other stuff moving. Dell finally gaining some traction today, and not just Dell, but HPE as well. Um, Nice check back into the EMAs yesterday. I finally had a good entry on it, right? This was the way to trade this was washouts. And, I missed the entry down here on last Friday. But we finally got a new place to buy, which I did, and a nice push today. Again, this name has been choppy along with the market as a whole, so we'll see if it can really put some distance here. I certainly hope it does, um, but it's always a possibility that it doesn't. Um, I do have a small trade on Ethereum. This is kind of a speculative trade, not something that I'm certainly not something that I'm banking on by any means. But I like this kind of flag off the lows here, holding the EMAs. I had actually bought it yesterday at the close. I still don't like what Bitcoin is doing by any means. And Ethereum didn't close particularly well today, but this is still well within structure. If anything, maybe we wick down here for one more tight little higher low, and then we finally go. Otherwise, we just crack down, which is totally reasonable too. But I did take a small trade on Ethereum just to diversify into crypto a little bit. I mean, this has been quite the oversold space. Whether it's fundamentally oversold or not is a whole different argument. But just purely from a technical standpoint and in a momentum space like this, or in a momentum name like this, it's down quite a bit. And yeah, so we'll see what happens with Ethereum. Hopes certainly aren't very high. Um, Beyond that, Uh, my watch list for tomorrow is pretty small. Software saw a bit of a red day today if we look at the IGV. But again, like nothing wrong here. I saw some traders talking about like a rotation out of software. I'm like, I don't think so. I think, a lot of software names just need time to kind of build out their bases a little bit. But I happen to really like Okta. If we can get a check back into the 20 tomorrow, I would certainly consider buying at the close. Earnings are on the 26. I'd like to get in position in this thing as fast as possible so I can build in a cushion before earnings. But I do like what Okta is doing. Um, Lilly, I did mention Lilly already. I would like to get positioned into this. And then the last sector that I'd kind of like to get positioned to is copper still. Again, if we can kind of get a check back into the 10 here on FCX or the 20 here on SECO, I would look for a potential trade. Um, it's interesting. This is quite a diversified market. I think it's very easy to be in a lot of different sectors in this market because so many sectors are showing strength. Um, which I always like. I don't like being concentrated in one sector. That's the way some people like to trade. Some people love when the only thing moving are the semis. But for me personally, I like when there's lots of things moving. I like being in several different things. And if I can put on some copper, some healthcare, and some software exposure, that would be awesome. Anyways, I did take a position on comp yesterday. Liked this check back into the 10. I like this kind of cup and handle pattern. I really like uh, this consolidation right under all-time highs, or not all-time highs, but relative highs. And I certainly think that this has the strength to continue higher. This is an interesting one because it's sort of like an Open Door or a Zillow, and these stocks are performing terribly. Um, However, there's obviously a divergence from these names, and this is also, a prominent software name, and perhaps this is sort of moving with the software space. Um, and that's kind of the thesis I'm using for this trade. Um, but again, I don't. This is just kind of an interesting one to track for me personally because it's just kind of hard for me to tell what sector this is exactly showing relative strength in because it's not real estate or it's certainly showing relative strength to real estate. Real estate isn't exactly strong, but these names don't often move with real estate necessarily, and it's not moving with its peers like Open or Zillow. Um, so that makes me think that this is more of a software type type trade, but it's a little hard to tell because it's not moving particularly in sync with software either. Although earnings have been strong on this name, and yeah, only time will tell with it. But I think this happens to look really, really, really good. Um, so yeah, that's about all I have. And again, we'll kind of see what happens in the coming days with the Qs and the SPY, right? I think a little more sideways is justified, but I also think at this point we're justified to break out to new all-time highs. So yeah, thank you for watching.